Iowa Theme Park Podcast number 2, Adventureland's Zach Snacks. It's time for the Iowa Theme Park Podcast with your hosts, Nick McMahon and Jack Salisbury. In this episode, our special guest is Adventureland's Rides Director and TikTok star, Zach Snacks.
Thank you for tuning in to the second episode of the Iowa Theme Park Podcast. I'm Nick McMahon.
And I'm Jack Salisbury.
Joining us today is a very special guest from Adventureland Park.
Hey, what's up? This is Zach from Zach Snacks.
All right, we have a few questions for you today, Zach. I'll start with the first couple questions. What is your favorite ride at Adventureland?
Sure, and thanks for having me on today. So as the rides director, I kind of have different rides on kind of both sides of the coin that are my favorites, both to run and to ride. And I'll start with what my favorite one is to run. If you would have asked me a year ago, I would have said the Skywheel was my favorite one to operate, because the operator really has to balance the ride, or used to have to do that. And for some of our ride operators, that used to be a pretty intimidating job, because if you didn't get it quite right, it would squeal and make some horrible noises, and people on the ride would wonder what's going on. After the Duratio, and when we updated the gondolas, we also put in a new control system that does all that work for the operator. Now that we have that new system in place, I'm not as fond of the wheel, because it's just not as challenging. It kind of does all the thinking for you. So now my new favorite ride to operate is probably the Tornado. So as you guys are probably aware, it has, and in fact, every single run of that ride is going to be completely different. How fast it comes in on those brakes can really be affected, of course, by the load on the ride, but also by the weather, the wind, how hot or cold it is. Occasionally, we may have to go out and tighten up the brakes, which our maintenance director loves it when I tell him that I think that that needs to be done, because that's a little bit of a chore to get that just right. But it's a little bit of a challenge, and I kind of like operating rides that have that challenging aspect to it. But really, all the rides I enjoy on some level operating. But probably the Tornado right now is my favorite to go out and run for a little bit. As far as to ride, I definitely would say the Monster. It's definitely our strongest roller coaster, in my opinion. However, if you would have asked me a year ago, I would have probably said the Falling Star. So I was a little bummed when it had to be retired, but it is what it is.
That is really cool to kind of learn about the aspect of how the brakes operate on the Tornado, because as a guest who's ridden it many, many times, I can say that everybody that ever operates it very well and very smoothly. So you would never even know as a guest all of that things happening about the ride.
Yeah, and in fact, there's only a handful of operators that actually know how to run the Tornado, just because of the time it takes to train on it. It definitely takes a lot longer to train somebody on that ride than it does on other rides, just because of that, the manual aspect, and the fact that it just has so much variation. We really have to spend a lot of time with our operators on that ride. So there may only be 7 or 8 employees in our whole department that actually know how to operate that.
We can't talk to you about just rides. We got to talk about food, right?
Of course.
What's your favorite food item?
My favorite food item is probably the sriracha chicken cone at the Chicken Shack. I kind of like something that has a little bit of a kick to it, and with that sriracha sauce, it's definitely got a little bit of spice to it. They usually put, I think, like some syrup on it too, and it's in like a cone bowl, so it kind of has a unique complexion when it's all put together. Probably second place, I'd say I'm pretty partial to the Sam Saloon, the kind of fried fish they have there, fish sandwich. That's pretty good as well. And flipping over to the employee side, something that you may not know is that there's actually a stand that's specific for employees called the commissary that all of our employees can eat at when they're on break. And every day they have a special in there. And my personal favorite special, and I get really excited when they have it, is the chicken tiki masala, which is an Indian dish that you probably won't ever see sold out in the park. Probably wouldn't sell very well in an amusement park setting, but it's one of my favorites when they have it. They try to give us a little bit of variety. So that way, we're not eating the same thing every day. And they usually do a pretty good job of giving us some good options in there.
That sounds great. Sounds really great. You might have to give that a try on TikTok sometime for us.
Yeah, review the commissary food. Well, maybe.
The fish and chips are by far my favorite at the park. You get Dave's sauce on there, and it's just perfect.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that stuff's really good. I love that sauce too.
How long have you worked at Adventureland?
So I started in May of 2009. So I'm coming up on 13 and a half years now.
Wow. How did you get to your current position of rides director? What steps did you take or whatever?
When I started, I was just a ride operator like you would encounter at any of our rides if you were to come to the park when we're open. And I did that for a couple of years. And after two and a half years of that, they asked if I wanted to become what then was called a team captain. We now call them assistant managers, but in the rides department, they go out and they basically make sure that all of our ride operators and assistants are, have everything they need and are ready to go each day. So they do a lot of our on-ride training for us. They'll give like restroom breaks or make sure that they have plenty of water, kind of do general supervision. And I did that for, I want to say probably 3 or 4 years. So that would have been mostly while I was in college. And around the time that I graduated from college, they asked if I wanted to become a rides manager, which our rides managers do a lot of the same things as the rides assistant managers, but they also handle a little bit more of the scheduling and do a little bit more of the guest interaction when there is an issue at a ride. And I did that for another 4 or 5 years, I want to say. I actually graduated with an education degree and was a high school history teacher for 4 years. And so during the school year, I'd teach, and then during the summer, I'd come out and do the rides manager job. And then in the summer of 2019, they asked if I would be interested in coming on full time. There was a retirement kind of higher up in the food chain in the company that was going to kind of trigger kind of a domino effect of some changes they'd have to make. So decided to seize that opportunity and haven't looked back.
Great. All right. So what are some of the challenges, like as a rides director that you run into, like what makes the job, you know?
There definitely are a lot of challenges to it. Obviously, probably the biggest challenge we've had in the last couple of years has been our staffing. And in the rides department, we have a very fixed number of employees that we have to be able to safely operate all the rides. And whereas other departments, they might be able to expand and contract based on how many employees they have. It's a very set in stone number for us. And if we fall below that number, we have to consider either closing a ride or trying to pull people from other departments. And so staffing has really become a big deal, especially with COVID and kind of the effects that that's had on the job market. That's become an increasing challenge in my role. Another challenge is the size of the park and the size of our department as well. The rides department is not necessarily the biggest department in the park, but it's one of the bigger ones. And so, ideally we'd like to have 200, 220 employees, and trying to kind of keep track of who all those employees are is very challenging. You have to know when they can be scheduled to work, kind of have to know some of what their strengths and weaknesses are, because you want to try and match what job you put them at with what those strengths and weaknesses are, what their preferences are. For example, some of our operators and assistants really prefer kiddie rides. And so we try to put those people at the kiddie rides because that's what they want to do. Some people want nothing to do with kiddie rides. And so just being able to know enough about each individual person that is part of the rides department with the size of it and the scope of it can be very challenging. But also with the size of the park, being able to manage all of these operators and assistants and make sure that they're doing the job correctly is very challenging, not just because of the number, but also geography. I mean, these people are spread out, all over the park. And so that's a real challenge. Even just locating someone can be a challenge. We might know that they're working at the Outlaw, but if we send somebody up there to go find them, they might not actually be there. They might be on break or something. So even something just as trivial as trying to find somebody can be a challenge. Luckily, I have about 14 or 15 managers and assistant managers that kind of are my eyes and ears. And so I really rely heavily on them to kind of help me to get around that size and scope issue. And they do a great job of kind of helping me to be able to make sure that things are being done correctly.
Okay.
Another challenge, especially I think relevant to this year, is the growth of the park and the growth of the number of rides we have. You know, with us adding 9 new rides, that's 9 rides that we've got to go through the manufacturer manuals and make sure that we have all the rider restrictions correct. That's 9 rides that we've got to actually learn how to operate the ride and then train the people on it. That's 9 rides we got to write operating manuals for and training checklists. So, you know, those are some of the big challenges, I'd say. And I think a final challenge I have is just trying to stay on top of what other parks are doing in kind of the ride operations world. Of course, in our industry, we're pretty geographically isolated from a lot of other parks. So while I would like to know maybe how, you know, Six Flags Great America handles certain operational issues like, you know, height issues or size issues or amputees and prosthetic policies. It's really hard to do that just because they're so far away. And when they're open, we're also open. So those are some of the challenges that I think that I face. But all in all, you know, it's a very rewarding job. One of my favorite things to do is to go out and give an employee a 30-minute break and just kind of people watch and watch the people having fun on the ride. So in spite of all the challenges, it's still very rewarding.
It's one of our favorite things to do at the park too, is people watch.
Oh yeah,
it's definitely fun.
Yeah. Do you ever have like a foods worker or something working on rides? If like there's staffing issues, do you have people kind of mingle within departments?
Yeah, it's actually pretty common for us to pull somebody from a different department. It's not very common for us to send somebody from rides to a different department just because we almost always are trying to get more people, but it is common for us to pull from foods. We do sometimes pull people from the hotel. You know, we pull from basically wherever somebody's got an extra person. We'll try to find a job that fits them. Yeah.
So working for the park, what are some decisions that you've had a hand in making that people can see in the park?
Yeah. I think a common question I get is, well, do you get to actually choose what rides we get? The answer to that is I don't necessarily, but they do ask me, you know, what rides I think would fit really well. So I do offer a little bit of insight from my vantage point of what I think would work or what maybe might not work from my perspective. But a lot of those decisions are kind of made in the upper part of our management structure. But a lot of the stuff that you would see, pretty much any of our operational procedures and policies that our ride operators are doing, you know, how they do the job is something that you would probably be able to see, the different hand signals they use, you know, height policies and how they go about that. Anything as far as if you have an interaction with the ride operator or ride assistant, probably I've had a hand in kind of deciding how we go about enforcing those policies or implementing them.
When and how did you decide to become the face of Adventureland on TikTok? Like what got started with that? I mean, it's a lot of us follow TikTok, you know, and we like seeing the updates and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, was it your idea? Did you just get thrown into the wolves?
So the TikTok was actually something that was created by an intern. So we every summer will hire a number of interns. A lot of them tend to work in food and beverage area, and one from the food and beverage happened to be a TikTok influencer, and so she kind of spearheaded creating it. And as a park, our marketing department felt like this might be a good opportunity for us to maybe try to target more of the younger crowd and do a little bit of direct marketing to them. And at the time, her best friend, who was a graphic design intern that actually worked for me, also was working here. And so the two of them kind of collaborated at first on a lot of the TikToks. Eventually, it got kind of punted over to my intern. And basically, she would periodically sit down with our marketing director, and they would kind of craft what they wanted to see each week. And at one point, they wanted to feature some of the park food. And I kind of being a little bit maybe opportunistic thought, well, if I do a review, then I not only, I could also get, the food for free and basically be able to have a little bit of a snack myself. So we did it, and that was really about the only reason why I volunteered for it was I wanted the mini donuts. And after doing that, evidently I did a good enough job that they decided they wanted to continue it. And so through some discussion, I think we all kind of decided that calling it a series of Zach Snacks was what we were going to do. And kind of the popularity, I think, for whatever reason, just kind of took off from there.
Yeah, we enjoy watching the updates, and if I had to provide any advice, I'd say you got to get Matt to ride some more rides, though. We don't see him ride rides that often.
Yeah, we're working on that. We'll have a whole bunch of new rides for him to ride this year.
All right.
Kind of shifting gears from that, who is somebody that you look up to in the industry?
Sure. I'd say I have a couple people. One of them is actually my kind of direct supervisor, Brandon. He used to be the rides director until I kind of took over. He's now our facilities director, but he's pretty much, I think, taught me everything I know, either directly or indirectly, from having worked under him as just kind of a ride operator, rides manager. But he's done a good job of kind of helping me to transition into the role as the rides director. He's kind of the person I'll go to bounce ideas off of as far as what kinds of things we might look to do in the department. So I definitely look up to him in that way. And I think I learned a lot from him. He has a lot more insight, I guess, into the maintenance side, and not only ride maintenance, but park maintenance as well, which is, those are kind of areas that I might not have as much depth of knowledge on. And so I always feel like I can learn something from him on that. Another person that I would say I look up to, there's a guy in the industry called Matt. His name is Matt Heller. He, I think now is like a consultant, but he used to be kind of a rides operations director at a number of amusement parks, including Universal Orlando. And he wrote a book called The Myth of Employee Burnout, which is a book that I kind of refer to and kind of use as kind of the backbone of what my management strategy is. So him having worked in the industry, he knows kind of the challenges of the seasonality of everything. And so he does a good job of kind of breaking things down into what are the most important things that someone like me can do to kind of support my department and support my managers and try to be as effective as possible. And so I've had the opportunity to also listen to him speak at a conference once, and he's very good at just kind of breaking things down into simple topics and getting the point across. And that's kind of the approach that I kind of try to take as well with my employees.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So what is the normal procedure for when a ride breaks down during an operational day? And what is usually the common cause for ride not opening for the day? Obviously, we know maybe mechanical issues, things like that, but also sometimes staffing issues, I would assume. Can you share a little insight on that?
Sure. So what normally happens is an operator will maybe notice something's not quite right, or they want somebody to come check something out, or maybe the ride just flat out won't start. And so what our ride operators will do is they'll call our park operator and tell the park operator what's going on. And then it kind of turns into a little game of telephone. So the park operator will either get in touch with Brandon, our facilities director, or if he's not there, with me, and will tell us what's going on. And one of the two of us will kind of decide who's the most effective to send to whatever ride is having an issue. So if it's something that's rather simple or probably more of an operator error, we'll tend to send a rides manager there to kind of look at it. So some common things that might cause an issue is some of our rides have a very specific procedure on what order of the buttons you're supposed to push first or second or third. And if you get it out of sequence, it basically locks up. Or they may have pushed the stop button, and on some of the rides, you actually have to pull the stop button back up. And so they may have forgotten that, hey, I need to pull the stop button back out. So those are the kinds of things that our managers might go and kind of assess and might be able to fix really quick without us having to send a maintenance technician. If it is something that sounds like it's going to require a maintenance technician, we'll just contact the maintenance director and tell them what's going on. They'll send out a maintenance tech and they'll assess what's going on and make whatever corrective action might be needed. And then after kind of testing the ride once or twice, they'll turn it back over to our ride operator. Some common things that we kind of encounter on the maintenance side, obviously just various things might just kind of start to wear out. And so they'll make those replacements or adjustments. Another thing that happens is parts maybe just slowly over time wear and get out of calibration. An example of that on our steel coasters, something that is important to making sure that the car goes around the track at the right speed is actually the gauge of the wheels. So that's how hard the wheels are pressing against the track or how much of a gap there is between the wheel and the track. And so if the gauge is set too tight, meaning the wheels are pushing too much on the track as it goes around, it might slow the car down. And if it's too loose, then the car might go around too fast. And most of our ride computers will kind of tell us, hey, this car is going too slow or too fast, and you might need to look at it. And occasionally, we may even have to change like a wheel on one of the roller coasters if it's worn too much, or on particularly the Monster, there's actually two sets of wheels. There's a warm weather wheel, which is a little bit softer, so it kind of slows it down. As it gets warmer, the car goes faster. Or there's a cold weather wheel that's a little bit harder, so it kind of makes it so the car can go around faster when maybe the weather is a little bit cooler, like in the spring or the fall. So those would be some of the kind of common things that they might look at. Like I said, replacing seat belts or adjusting a sensor, those are probably 99% of the types of things that they will do. As far as a ride not operating for an entire day, I would say probably the most common thing that causes that is just parts availability. So although we would like to have as many parts on hand as we possibly can, it's just not feasible to have every single part on hand. For example, if a motor goes bad on a ride, it just may not be feasible for us to have a spare motor lying around. And so sometimes sourcing those parts can be a real challenge for us, especially when a lot of our rides are made abroad. So we have a number of rides from Italy, a few rides from Germany and the Netherlands. So sourcing parts, especially with kind of the state of the supply chain, can be a little bit challenging right now as well.
Sure. Understandable.
So just kind of an add-on to that question. What about rides that are down for an extended period of time? Like Sidewinder was down for, a considerable amount of the season. Can you share any insight into why that was down?
Yeah, I can't go into the specifics on that, but it definitely fell partly into that parts availability. That ride happens to be made in Italy, so getting parts from Italy has been a little bit challenging on it.
So I guess kind of the last question here already. What keeps you busy in the off season? What do you like? Just what's your day to day in the off season look like as opposed to the regular season?
Sure. So the regular season is of course a lot busier. The off season is a little bit quieter. A lot of what I do is just kind of planning for the next year, making sure our staffing plans are ready to go for the next season, making sure our manuals and training checklists are ready to go. Something else that I kind of help out with is with our printing and signage. Actually, we have somebody that kind of does that on a full-time basis, but I do help out with that in the off season. So any of the menus you see in the park, the safety signage on the rides, menus in the parking lot, all that, we actually have an on-site sign shop that produces that. And so I help out a lot with that in the off season as well. And then of course I try to get a little bit of vacation in and downtime when I can as well. But that's kind of what my day-to-day looks like in the off season.
All right. Well, I believe that's all we have for you today. Again, we really appreciate you taking time out of your day to join us. Fans, we definitely want to make sure that you check out our Facebook page, Adventureland Iowa Fans Unofficial. There's a contest we're currently running for an exclusive tour of the park before the season opens. And so check out those details on the fan page. And anything for us at all, Zach or Jack?
Not that I can think of. Thanks again for having me on, though.
Well, thank you for joining us. I mean, kind of same thing that I told Mike, just spending so many of my summers at Adventureland. This is great to get to know the inner workings of how it works, and then share this information with other people too. It's definitely a gift.
Thank you for tuning into the Iowa Theme Park Podcast. Be sure to follow Iowa Theme Park enthusiasts on Facebook and YouTube for updates on future episodes about Iowa's theme parks. Comment and let us know what you would like to hear on future episodes.